Hey everyone. So, as you can see, my surroundings are a little bit different today. I'm sitting in my little gaming room. I tried to make this video a little bit earlier, and my phone kept saying that the data was full, and it was because I wasn't updating my phone, and so the system files were taking up like half the space of my phone. So I had to redo it. So I figured I'd sit down and play a game while I was waiting for that to happen. Anyway. So, I've been asked to give a little bit of a discussion on the concept of reality. Is reality really what we think it is? Or is it so much more or so much different than what we think? Well, to be honest, we don't really know. We don't know a goddamn thing about how far reality actually extends beyond our own perception and the capabilities of the human mind. Now, as I said the other day in my last video about the illusion of choice, I split the brain and the mind into two separate entities. That is what biological psychologists do. They do not see them as the same entity. The brain is the autonomous entity that you have zero control over. And then there's the mind, which is you, the entity that makes everything you, that you do have control over to a degree. You do not have full control over your mind. That is why people have issues. That is why you have things like mental illness and such, because the brain does things that affects the mind, and then the mind has trouble dealing with that, and you start getting these issues. The biggest thing to understand about the brain and the mind is the brain. That gray, goopy, sloppy thing in your skull is the boss. That is the chess master. The mind, who you are, what you are aware of around you, what you experience in life, and understand that you are just a pawn to your brain, who is the chess master. Now, we know the brain itself is working 24/7. Even when we're sleeping, there are still brain waves indicating that our brain is still doing something. We don't know what it is because we don't know jack shit about sleep and dreams either. It's all theory. But we do know the brain picks up on everything that happens. Everything that goes on around us, the brain is picking up on it. The issue is it doesn't like to share it with us. It picks up so much information every second of every minute of every hour of every day of our lives, and it will probably not share 99.9% of that information with our mind. One, because it's too busy and it finds maybe these things are just not, something we need to know. It's irrelevant in terms of survival. Or it knows that if it shares all this information with our mind, we are going to be so bogged down and overloaded by this massive tsunami of information completely pounding against our minds nonstop, to the point where we would be pretty much unable to function, because we would be spending all of our time trying to even grasp the amount of information that is flooding into our minds. So the brain keeps it to itself. Now, you've heard the term perception is reality. I don't really like that term because I don't think that is the case completely, but I do think it warrants. It is something that does make sense, because in essence, reality is subjective. It is purely subjective on the individual. So the individual's personality and their perspective does sort of influence their reality. So in a way, yes, perspective is reality, because your perspective is based on you, and that part of you is going to interpret the world different than somebody else. And so it is subjective. Now, the biggest thing that we know that gives us a clue to the fact that reality is not exactly everything we think it is, beyond our five senses, is because our five senses are limited, but we see other animals, other creatures in the world where their senses go beyond ours to the point where they can see, hear, feel, smell, all these things in the world that we can't. Take, for instance, the mantis shrimp. This thing can see 12 separate colors. Humans can only see 3. We see our 3 primary colors, and then we piece them all together to make our other colors, our secondary colors, and that is what we are limited to. Mantis shrimp have 12, which means they can combine so many more colors that we don't even see and we can't even comprehend. Try to imagine a new color. It is impossible, because maybe our brain can imagine a new color, but it's not going to tell us what it is, because it wouldn't matter, because we can't see it. So why should we know about it? So it just doesn't say anything. This is the same with sounds. There are sounds out there that we cannot hear. The brain picks up on them, but it's not going to let you pick up on them or know about them because you can't hear them. So what's the point? How does this affect your survival? By telling you something that you can't do anything about and has no effect on you. So the brain just stays silent and keeps to itself and doesn't share. This also works the other way around. Humans, we have many cones in our eyes. Cones, these are used to pick up on color. Many animals do not even have cones, or they are very limited to cones. Therefore, they don't see a lot of color. This is the idea behind that dogs kind of see gray. They don't really see much color because they don't really have a whole lot of cones to detect it. Unfortunately for humans, these cones take up the majority of space in our eyes to allow us to detect color, which means there's not a lot of room for the other thing, which is a rod. Rods are used to pick up on light. This is why our night vision as humans sucks compared to other things. This is why cats have phenomenal night vision, is because they have an insane amount of rods in their eyes. So we can sit here and think that we know reality, but we really don't know much at all beyond our own perception of what our brain allows us to comprehend. All that other information is locked away in the brain, and he is not sharing it with you. So no, we don't know what reality really is. We know reality to the limit of our senses and the information that we can process and comprehend as human beings. Even with our power of higher level critical thinking, we are still extremely limited. It is probably 99% of reality out there we do not even pick up on. Some other creatures pick up on pieces here and there that we don't know about, but we can't comprehend that because our senses don't see it or feel it or taste it or smell it or hear it. So how can we comprehend it if we've never experienced it? And if our brain doesn't think it's something worth worrying about, why do we need to worry about it? Why does it need to tell us? Now, I am going to recommend this book because I find this book to be one of the most fascinating reads I have ever read in my life. This guy, this author, is pretty much the pioneer of biopsychology in every way. This guy sees the world in such a different perspective from everyone else. It is crazy because you read his stuff and you're like, I cannot fathom how this guy thought of this up and figured out a way how to test this in a laboratory setting. Now, this book is called Phantoms in the Brain. Right here. It's alright, it's backwards because I'm using a backwards camera. But this guy, Phantoms in the Brain, one of the best books you may ever read in your life. Even if you are not into psychology, this has nothing to do with psychology in the traditional sense of what you hear when you think psychology and you think therapist, psychiatrist, medications to control your crazies. This has nothing to do with that. This is all about your brain and how your brain functions and how it affects your mind and thus how it affects your perception of reality. One of the most interesting stories that he goes through in this is he talks about a condition that is pretty rare, but it does happen. In layman terms, it is called right hemispherical neglect. I can't quite remember what the official medical terminology for it is. I've always just called it right hemispherical neglect. What this is when people suffer damage to the right hemisphere of their brain through blunt trauma or puncturing trauma, or the most common cause is stroke or blood clot. It affects a certain part of the brain that deals with directional coordination. It deals with that part of you that understands the concept that there is a left side to everything and a right side to everything. You have your right hand, your left hand. This particular issue, when the brain is damaged in this way, does not understand anymore that there is a left side. Your reality has changed. Left no longer exists. Someone could try to sit here all day till they're blue in the face trying to explain to you what left is. And you will have a blank look on your face like this person is crazy because you have never heard of what left is, and you cannot even fathom or comprehend what it is. Your whole world now is just right. It is not left. Studies have shown that the people that suffer with this, they will ignore everything to the left side of them. You could have a person standing there, right in front of them, just off center to the left of them. They will not be aware that person is there unless that person starts moving around and jumping up and down and shaking, because then the brain detects movement, which is a different part of your brain from this whole idea of understanding spatial orientation and direction. You will notice these people. They will only eat food on the right half of their plate. If they put makeup on, they will only do makeup on one side of their face. They brush their teeth. They only brush the right side of their teeth. Now this sounds like, okay, that's a weird disease, whatever. But it's a good example of the fact that our brain is the chess master. Our mind is the pawn. If something happens to the brain that either creates or deletes something that it can comprehend, that also creates or deletes what we, our individual mind, can comprehend. This would imply that reality is not solid. It is not written in stone. It is purely subjective to the individual, their brain, and anything that has to do with their brain. So something that we take for granted, which is the idea of left and right. You think that is just something you automatically learn and you know the rest of your life. Well, guess what? There are things that can damage your brain, and you no longer understand that there is a left in the world anymore. Your reality now consists of right. That is it. It is crazy. Other things in this book that he discusses are also fascinating, like the idea behind phantom limb pain. We know that this amputated part of the person is gone. The person themselves know that this, let's say, hand is gone. It talks about a guy who was in a very terrible motorcycle accident and had to have his arm amputated afterwards. He kept complaining afterwards that it felt like he had a fist so tight his fingers were digging into his palms. And over time, he was saying that his nails were growing from these fingers into his palms and going through his hand to the point where it was causing him agonizing pain. His hand was not there. There was no way that was happening. However, the brain thought it was and told the mind, yes, this is happening. And so you have this feeling of pain even though it does not exist. Reality is subjective. Now, the great thing about this doctor is he has come up with some really fascinating ways of treating things. And one of his specialties is treating phantom limb pain. He helped this man break the cycle of pain in his hand by creating a sort of mirror box where this guy stuck one hand into this box and it would create a reflection on the other side of the box to mimic his other hand. And he would sit there and stare at it until he could focus long enough to convince his mind and his brain that his other hand was there. And then the hand that was there, he would have in a fist and he would slowly pull it out of the fist. So it's no longer a fist. He would watch as he pulled it back to normal. But it would look like his other hand was doing it due to the mirrors in the box. This actually convinced his brain that he fixed the problem, that he actually had that hand and that he finally unclenched it. Crazy. Absolutely bonkers. This shows how easily our brain can be manipulated just as much as our mind, even though the brain is the chess master. The brain is not infallible. It will have problems, and those problems will become our problems in our mind as human beings. But it also shows that you can change what the brain perceives to a degree. You just got to trick it. And by tricking the brain, either through these things that this doctor does, or through not tricking, but damage to the brain, you alter a person's reality in the truest form possible. It is not you just saying, oh yeah, this doesn't exist, you're crazy. It is no, this person literally, legitimately, this does not exist anymore. You get right hemispherical neglect, the left side of everything in existence does not exist anymore. That is your reality. So, this is an interesting topic that I love to talk about because people love to think that perception is indeed reality, which for the most part can be argued, yes, your perception is reality, but your perception is in your mind. It is what your mind picks up and what it is told by the brain. If the brain doesn't want to tell you something, it is not going to be picked up by your mind. It is not going to be perceived, and therefore it does not exist. There are sounds, smells, tastes, feelings, sights that we cannot see. We know they're probably there, but we haven't figured out a way how to detect them yet. And our brain is probably completely aware of what these things are and is probably sees them. It picks up on them. It knows they're there. It's just not going to tell you, because what would be the point? If your brain knows that there's dark matter all around us, how's that going to help our survival by telling us that? All it's going to do is bog us down with useless information that is going to hamper our ability to focus on what we can sense as reality, and that is going to hamper our survival. So our brain keeps its mouth shut and only shares what it thinks we need to know. Crazy. But something to think about. I want to hear your guys' and gals' opinions on this particular matter, because I love hearing people say perception is reality, and they truly believe that everything that their senses pick up is what it is, and it is the only thing that it is. It is not. Another thing that I have been baffling people with, it's been very hard to explain to people, but the people who actually understand what I'm trying to get across in the message, it baffles them. I have been thinking about this for probably 15 years. Yes, we have rods and cones in our eyes, as I suggested previously. Those cones pick up on color. But who is to say, well, actually I should say this first, what gets picked up by the cones is from your eyes, obviously. Your eyes see something, they detect that color from the cones, it gets sent back into your optic nerve. The optic nerve delivers that message to your mind and your brain and says, hey, that's red, that's blue, that's green. But we know everybody's brain is different. Everyone's mind is different. Even if the physiology of our eyes is identical to everyone else, we have the same exact amount of rods and cones as another person, who is to say we see the same thing. And I simplify this down into color. How do we know that the color I see is actually the same color that you see? Say your entire life, whenever you look at this particular color growing up, when you learned colors in school, You look at the shade of color, it's blue. You have been told your entire life, this color is blue. This color is red. This color is yellow. So that's what we believe. That's what we know. That is our reality. That shade, that hue is blue. But say somebody else also is told a particular color is blue or red or green, whatever it may be. But the information that goes through their optic nerve into their brain and their mind is not the same as yours. So maybe what they see as blue is not actually the same color that you see as blue. You will both call it blue because your entire lives you have been told that is blue. So you just, okay, yeah, that's blue. But perhaps my blue that I see might be a completely different color from what somebody else sees that is blue. Maybe my color of blue to somebody else is purple to me. But to them it is blue because their whole life they've been told this color is blue. But to me, what they see might actually be what I've been told my whole life is purple. We don't know. It is something in the field that is being discussed, it is being studied, and it is fairly agreed upon that this is highly probable. I hate myself for the fact that I did not go to my department lead and ask if I could run a study on this, because I've had this idea for like 20 years now and never did anything about it other than talk about it. And then somebody went and got a grant and started this study and started to realize that yes, this may very well be the case. Which would be crazy if you can actually figure out a way to mimic somebody else's information when they see color and show that to another individual. It might make you feel wacky as hell because your whole life you're told, yeah, the sky is blue. To you, that blue is blue. To somebody else, that blue might be purple to you. You might see somebody else's reality and be like, what the hell is this? Why is the grass orange? Why is the sky purple? Why is black orange? It's weird. It's funny because it is so damn weird to think about. But food for thought. Read the book Phantoms in the Brain. There are some wonderful ideas in there that he brings up about possibilities of things that we haven't quite tested yet or been able to confirm, but it will trigger thoughts in your head to where you will create new questions about things in your life that you may have taken for granted. And now you might start questioning whether your reality is truly reality in every sense of the word, or if it is all completely based on what your brain tells you it is. You think about it too much, you might go a little crazy, like me. I think the reason I'm nuts is because I've been studying psychology for 20 years. And when I got into biopsychology and started seeing how easily our brain can manipulate our mind and our perception, I started questioning everything. And it led me to become a little kooky because I don't know what is real and what is not. This applies to other things. My next video that I do will discuss my beliefs and what I have learned about the idea behind schizophrenia. I personally believe that schizophrenia itself is a weakening of the barrier between your mind and your brain. And information from your brain that you're not meant to hear is leaking through, and your mind doesn't know what to do with it. It is like your brain is talking to itself, but your mind has its ear pressed up against the wall and can hear what your brain is saying. So you start seeing or hearing things that aren't there. Quite possible. I don't know. This is something that will probably never be answered because you cannot test this. We know that schizophrenia usually develops in late teens to your 20s. It is not an early onset illness. Very few people catch this at a young age. Now, I did a study in college and studied to see if the flu virus, when caught in the first or second trimester of a pregnant person, increased the risk factor of schizophrenia. But this is impossible to test. It is completely 100% immoral in every regard. The only way you could properly test this would be to take a ton of women who are pregnant in their first trimester, inject them with a flu virus, keep them under perfectly controlled laboratory settings until they have a child, and then you keep that child in a perfectly controlled laboratory setting for like 30 years and see how many get schizophrenia between the experimental group and the control group. You cannot just go nag pregnant women and lock them up and force a disease to be injected into them and then hold their babies hostage for 30 years trying to see if that in fact changes something and increases the rate of schizophrenia. Is purely theory. So we will talk about that next time, because I also want to address the common myth that schizophrenia is the same thing as multiple personality disorder or dissociative disorder. It is not. It is not even close to the same thing. Thanks to Hollywood and the media, who don't understand how these illnesses work, create false information and people believe it. If somebody sees in a movie, oh, this guy's got schizophrenia and he's got 12 personalities. That's not how it works. That is not schizophrenia. If he's got 12 personalities, he's got multiple personality disorder. Now, if this guy is hearing voices that aren't there, or seeing things that aren't there, or feeling like things are there in their presence when they're not there, that is schizophrenia. And it is very, very difficult to treat, because you, as a person who does not have schizophrenia, and you cannot see or hear or feel what this schizophrenic does, it's very hard to understand their problem and their burden. You can give them medications to help get rid of that, but the majority of medications used to treat schizophrenia are very controversial. They generally have more side effects to them than benefits. And so they are dished out according to whether the risk outweighs the reward, the reward outweighs the risk, because we don't like to give that up very much, because we know there are some severe consequences to being on these medications. Anyway, long story. going on 35 minutes. I thought this was going to be like a 5-minute talk. But as you can see, me as a person, I ramble. Because I like to try and make things as understandable as possible, because some of the topics I cover are not exactly easy to comprehend for many people. So, for those of you who made it past 35 minutes, again, like I said in my Knowledge is Power video, congratulations, you just realized you still have patience. You may even say that you have a craving for knowledge and you are willing to use your time to gain knowledge. Either way, you have just improved yourself. You've gained more power. Maybe you learned something new that you want to go read about and educate yourself a little more. But anyways, I hope you're all having a good day. I hope you have a good week. And I hope that you all treat each other with kindness and care. Okay? So, as I always say, be good, people. Be good. And I will see you next time.